All right.
there are times when that's going to be a legitimate thing, and you're going to have to realize you're going to have to sacrifice some rapport to get there. And I've done that a few times, and I realized, you know what? I'm gonna say it, and I'm gonna be as reasonable, pleasant, but I'm not going to basically be super soft about this because this is important, and this is
Right.
a I can feel like this is a life and death kind of situation lingering out here in the next 36 months. You're in trouble, and you need to know that there's a way out. And 3 more stents and a bunch of statins is not going to get it done.
No.
And
No.
so as a result, there's been a few times when I've been more assertive, and of course, that's legitimate. But if anybody there is under 50, you know what I'm saying? In other words, that should be pretty well saved for people that are in serious trouble. If your niece is 50 pounds overweight, and you just can't wait to tell her that she should be eating potatoes instead of steak, keep it shut. You know what I mean? Keep it shut. If you're going to do anything, you might tell her, hey, you might send her or direct her to forks over knives or some short speech. Let somebody else do your talking for you.
That's what I always say. Just defer because you have no credibility, unfortunately.
Yeah.
With I have in my life talked to 4 or 5 people in my family that I really worry about.
Yeah.
And none of them follow what I said.
Right.
I mean,
Sure.
my mother and my aunt and my partner, yes, those are the, and but the people I have people that I really care in my family, and I but I did that because I wanted to say that I did it and that I didn't keep this secret for me, and I did it in a very compassionate and nice way, but it didn't work. I mean, they didn't listen anyway.
You do the best you can, and we call it a day. That's all you can do. Yeah.
Tell Dr. Lisle to talk about the same topic, but maybe more to a specific situation here.
Yeah.
Someone sent me an email to ask you. This person says, my biggest problem is having relatives living in the same house and eating lots of processed food. I have tried separating shelves, but it is in my face and it is hard at times to look the other way. Any suggestions how to deal with this? I think it's very difficult when you live with people. Very difficult. I don't know how I would handle it.
Pretty tough. I think that all you can do is you can make sure that you are disciplined enough about making sure you've got 2 things available to you: not only healthy food that you like, but that it's also got an ease of operation. Okay, so it can be a hassle. If it's a hassle, literally reaching to the back of the refrigerator to get your apples, and you have to reach past their chocolate cake and their cheese. This is actually a problem. So strangely enough, part of my prescription for you goes right to the heart of what I called earlier the channel factors. That think about channel factors as if you've ever slid an appliance like I have, like slide a refrigerator across a slick floor, and it'll have either feet that are smooth, or it might even have little rollers. Or if you've ever obviously rolled anything, and you can roll something, and then it'll hit a tiny little rock or a tiny little pebble or something, and you could literally stop it. So like almost a grain of sand on a slick surface could stop that refrigerator. A decent sized grain of sand, depending upon what in other words, this is the physics of how it is that things stop. And so I tell a story about a lady that came to the McDougall program, and she shared this with us, that she had come to the program and learned about how important that the ease of operation, or what I call energy conservation, or what we would call also channel factors. In other words, how important ease of operation is. It's a super big deal. It's a way bigger deal than we generally appreciate. This is why, for example, when McDonald's instituted the drive-through in the late 60s, it quickly sold 70% of their sales, which remains true to this day. In other words, it's too much trouble to go across the parking lot. Just, if we could just sit in our car and not actually have to get out, that's going to be a big deal. So this lady was raising 7 sons, of all things, in the Midwest. And she had listened to us about making things easier for them to eat healthy food. So she dedicated a colander to grapes. So she went home and she put a bunch of grapes in the colander and rinsed it and put it in the refrigerator and thought, well, that's going to be easier than them having to get into the refrigerator, get into the bag of grapes, pull it out themselves one at a time. We're going to have it right there available. Nothing. 24 hours goes by. Nobody ate any grapes. And I don't know what moved her to do this, but she just did. This is one of these things that happens. Based on the same principle, she thought, I wonder if it's too much trouble to pull the grapes off the stalk. So she pulled the thing out of the refrigerator, set a bowl down, picked all of the grapes off the stalk, had them in a bowl, put it back in the refrigerator, and they were gone in no time. It's like, wow. A bunch of teenage boys were too lazy to actually take a branch of grapes off the stalk. And, that's a story I haven't forgotten. And there's been many other such stories, including one of my own. So I can remember at some point, 15 years ago, thinking that, when I'd look at an apple and I'd buy some of them, I'd look over at them and I'd think, gosh, I don't know, just the idea of my teeth, one of them got kind of damaged. My front teeth got damaged, it got banged up, and I think it's about 80% solid, and just a little worried about biting into it. And it's a little bit stressful. And then you get a big old bite in your mouth, and it's got some edge of the skin that could maybe be uncomfortable in your mouth. And then when you start chewing it, or it might spurt out at you, when you bite into it, get on your shirt, maybe on your chin a little bit. And then, if you're chewing, you might get some skin caught between your teeth, and like literally, and for what? An apple, 300 calories a pound, pretty good. But I mean, this isn't chocolate cake, for God's sakes. And so I find myself just sort of passing over it. And I thought one day about that, and I thought, it caught my attention at some point that somebody had used a corer. And I remember as a kid, I would always use a corer for pears and apples. And I actually made a comment about it on a show of AJ's, probably, I don't know how long ago. And like 2 people sent me these apple cores. And anyway, it makes a difference, because if an apple's cored, now I don't have to chomp into it and have it spurt. It's actually less likely to have the skin stuck between my teeth. I can eat a dainty amount that is easily handleable, and I can just sort of leave the rest there, and it's not weird that I took 2 bites out of an apple and set it on the counter. No, it's cored there, and other people, in the house would feel free to take a little chunk of one of those eighths of the apple. It's like, it's a better way to eat an apple. Okay. Now,
well,
yeah. And so this
is that goes back to really to energy conservation, even though it's silly to think that, but if it's easier and I use less energy, I'm more likely to do it.
Yep. Yeah, I was making a big deal about this with Alan, and Alan was resisting against it because when he wanted to talk about the pleasure trap, he wanted to say pleasure-seeking pain avoidance, pleasure-seeking pain avoidance, because it was nice and simple. And the idea of saying pleasure-seeking pain avoidance and energy conservation was like, so much more to say. It's more complicated. No, it's like the very principle itself was acting against it. And so I kept hitting him over the head with it. And then one day he said, I have to admit, when I come home, I'm going for the easiest food that there is, because I don't want to go to anything where there's any trouble. And he goes, I am noticing that consistently. And I have to admit that you're right, as much as it pains me. And so that's what I would say to this person. And that is that the best thing you can do, we can't hypnotize you and have you not see the junky food around. But what we can do is, make sure that you understand that probably the most important thing that you're going to do is to get organized enough and up the learning curve enough and have enough pleasant space, where your stuff can be, where you have easy access to things that you like, that are competitive. That is the best chance that you're going to have for making as many good decisions as possible under that environment. That environment is a very difficult environment to succeed. People don't believe me, but it's true. If I lived with a group of people that somebody brought home donuts, it'd be a disaster. They worked at a donut shop and they brought home half a dozen donuts every day. And when they got off work and some of them were chocolate covered or maple covered or glazed, it'd be like, I'd be eating a lot of donuts. It would be disgusting. And that's because they'd be right in my face. If they brought home a ham and cheese one, I wouldn't eat that because I'm a vegan. But I would eat the maple bar, you know what I mean? And they'd say, oh, well, there's some animal egg in it. I'm like, well, I can't see the egg, so that's vegan enough.
That's vegan enough. Well, somebody said something here that I've done before, and it's, we do this with other things. Like if I go to a clothing store and I see, I don't know, a tight tank shop or something, and that I would not wear, or I don't know, a cowboy hat, even though I like cowboy hats, but I'm not going to wear it. And so I tell myself, well, that's not, I don't wear that. That's not my clothes. So, but we don't do that with food. And someone was saying here that when they are tempted, they open the refrigerator and there's some kind of junk food. They tell themselves, this is not my food, or I don't eat that. And for some people, it may work, but I don't know if it works for everybody.
I don't know. I actually did an interesting change. For me, I had a couple of adult children move back in with me, and one of them was getting married, so she was going to stay here for about 6 months. And she's a little militant, used to be vegetarian, i.e., and now she's not because it works better for her. Like, whatever, I don't care. I'm not going to argue. She's the argumentative of the clan, and the animal food in my house doesn't tempt me at all. Donuts would tempt me, but animal food does not tempt me in the slightest. And so my attitude is, no, I don't care what you have in the house. But what happened is that all of her stuff's like all over my refrigerator and it's in the way. And now suddenly it's a hassle for me to get to my food. And suddenly I'm finding myself, what I watch for, Gustavo, a little thing, and obviously this is different than the getting along discussion, but what I watch for is I watch for tiny little changes in my proclivity to do something because of the ease. It's actually really interesting. And this brings back a point that I learned 15 years ago from talking to somebody, that knew about internet advertising, that it was becoming extremely important to write code carefully for internet advertising because every click that it took to get it sold reduced your sales volume by 50%. So some sloppy code where you have to click 2 more times, it's like, whoa, you just cut your sales by 75%. So I heard that and I was like, that is amazing that this tiny little bit of information, and I know I am that way, like, oh yeah, come to our website, oh, just fill in this thing. Like I'm filling in nothing, people. There's no way. Like I'm not going to stop here and have several seconds and then have you emailing me things. Like, no, I'm not that interested. Fine. Like how many people do they lose behind that? I mean, if people are like me, they're losing unbelievable numbers of people. So anyway, what I did was after about a month of this, I was getting frustrated and I decided, you know what, Doug, I don't know how long she is. She says she's going to be out of here in 5 months, but who knows? So I decided to buy myself a little refrigerator and stick it right in the kitchen. And so it was money well spent. I very quickly got used to that. That's my refrigerator. I told people, you can't put anything in that refrigerator. So you can go in there and take a few things out. I don't mind you eating some of my healthy food if you want to. That wasn't a problem. Nobody did that. But I said, you're not putting anything in my refrigerator.
No, put anything.
And what happened very quickly for me was that I actually forgot the big refrigerator was there. It doesn't even occur to me. Like, that's where my food is. It's in my refrigerator.
Well, that might be a really good solution.
An interesting idea for people. If there's any space at all, like I just commandeered a space and wasn't a large space. It's like, hey, there's no reason a refrigerator can't be there. I'm just going to stick it there. And it's turned out to be a very pleasant thing to have as my own unique space.
Right. Okay. All right. Tell us, Dr. Lisle, people want to know this. I don't know if you can tell us yet, but people know that you and Dr. Jen Hawk are writing a book.
Yes.
And so is it going along? Do you know when it might come out? Does it have a title?
Oh, yes, it's got a title. The book, of course, was due out in the summer of 2021. We're kind of secretive about this book. This is really a major work. This is not something. This is a book that I've been working on for more than 6 years, and so this is also, and then integrating Jen into it and bringing what her sort of unusual talent and knowledge into it and integrating it. This is quite a process, and so we actually thought that we were going to be done and have a book in our hands last summer. I would say my best guess is I think we're going to be done this coming spring, and I think we'll probably have a book in our hands by the fall. In other words, the way we write and the way we do things, by the time we think we're done, we are probably far more done than most authors. In other words, Jen basically has been a book editor before, and so we're very perfectionistic. So by the time we're done, we are probably very close to done. And then it's just about it's about, we have an artist that we're working with. There's going to be quite a bit of art in the book, and it's going to be, it's really, it's special. It's completely, I hit upon the idea, like I said, many years ago. I had been searching for what I was going to write next, and I had hundreds of titles and 1,000 pages of notes I've been taking for all the years after the Pleasure Trap. After the Pleasure Trap, I probably took a couple of years off and didn't know what I was going to do next. And then these ideas about self-confidence and self-esteem, these things started to sort of percolate in my head. Some of the ideas that you'll see in the Pleasure Trap, certainly you start to see the seeds of it in this chapter. The Getting Along Without Going Along is very much a psychological chapter about human relations. Later on in the book, you'll see that the reason Jen Hawk even found me was because of a footnote. So in a footnote in the back, I can't remember which chapter it was, but I describe, and as Jen now tells me, which is common among academics, when you come up with an important new idea, she calls it, you plant the flag, like you're a conqueror. That's what she calls it. And I planted a flag, and I called the phenomenon the ego trap. And I knew actually that the ego trap was a very, very big deal, but it sounded a little too cute because you just wrote a book called The Pleasure Trap. And then it's like, oh, so you're the guy with the trap, pleasure trap, ego trap, like that's how you. It's like, well, actually, the truth of the matter is, the pleasure trap and the ego trap, 20 years later, after naming it, the truth is that there isn't a third one. Okay, there's other traps we could talk about where we're being deceived into interesting mistakes, but the ego trap is a giant motivational problem for people. It's where, for some interesting reasons, the bar gets set a little bit too high, and now we may succeed for a while, and then when we start to fail, we feel embarrassed and we feel intimidated, and then we quit. And so I told that story in a footnote about a hunter who gets successful on a hunt, more successful than he deserves, and then he wants to shy away from hunting again, and he pretends whatever he's hurt his foot, which he's trying to hold on to his status or esteem as long as he can. And that avoidance of doing your best is a self-destructive process, but may be useful for your genetic code. In other words, it actually may be genetically profitable. This constitutes an extraordinary conflict of value that the human confronts. And anyway, the point is, I don't even know where I'm going with this. Oh yeah, it was that little comment that Jen Hawk read, and she recognized that was central to her problem in finishing her doctoral dissertation. She realized that in one paragraph I had described a dynamic that was literally central to her life. And so she filed that away, and then finally called me one day, and then we had our very first discussion, and I have notes from it. And I was like, who the hell is this? If anybody of you have ever listened to Jen Hawk, you will realize that it's like a basketball fan seeing Michael Jordan for the first time. It's like the guy just jumps higher than everybody else. So that was my, it's not like I hadn't been around sharp, interesting people in my time. I had. My friends are capable people, and I admire them. And then this was a Lamborghini. They're all a bunch of good, solid Camrys, and they're reliable and they're solid. But when a Lamborghini blows out of the water, that's what happens. So so Jen Hawk's thinking needed to be integrated with a major book that I had already been working on for a long time. It's tricky to do that well, and tricky to feather that in. And we were a little bit overly optimistic, but to let everybody know, I'm immensely proud of this book. It's special. I think it's the best thing that I will ever do in my career. I can't imagine that there would be something else that I could do in the future that would equal this. So it takes time, and it'll get here when it gets here.
Wow.
But it's definitely majorly on its way. It's mostly finished, but we have some. We're not going to rush it to finish it. We are going we're going to do it to the very best of our ability.
Right. And does it have a title that you can share?
I can't tell you. We're going to release one chapter so people will actually know what this book is. We're going to release one chapter to our Living Wisdom Library people, just because they've actually pre-ordered the book. And so they're tapping their hands and they're like, where is it? It's supposed to be here. So we're going to let them know actually a little bit about what they pre-ordered so that they find out. And I think they're going to be very excited and fascinated. It's not a normal book, folks. It's very different. And so any of you in the Living Wisdom Library will get a tantalizing taste of what this thing is very soon.
Okay. All right. Great. I just want to mention that everybody or anybody can go to your website, Esteemed Dynamics, and book a session with you or Dr. Hawk. And I can't recommend it highly enough. But we're all waiting for this book, and of course, I want to at some point feature here in the book club. Well, Dr. Lisle, I just want to ask you one more question. This is probably an easy one for you, but somebody asked, what is a person to do when on top of constant battles with the pleasure traps, there is also, well, this person says an eating disorder. I don't know if that's what we can call it. And he says, in our case, obsession with chocolate that destroys all efforts. And then he says, plus anxiety and depression. So I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, I would say that the following is true. So most people aren't going to have anything of this nature. So if I don't know how much chocolate is being eaten and just how problematic this is. So it can be. So there's people that can be swallowing enormous amounts of chocolate. In my Pleasure Trap talk, I point out that chocolate is the #1 food craving in the world. Chocolate has a chemical combination that is literally, or depending upon how it's put together and how it's all processed together, the chocolate is literally the biggest dopamine hit behind food that exists in the human diet. So it's hardly surprising that once in a while we're going to find somebody that chocolate can take their life just completely off the rails. It doesn't happen often. It's rare. Mostly it's just the pleasure trap in general. It's not something so specific that will drive people into the river. But if it does, and that is a literally major challenge for an individual, which it could be. If that's true, then I have to tell you that we have to look at it in exactly the same way that an alcoholic would look at alcohol. So that means, it doesn't mean we go to Chocolate Anonymous. It means that most of the people, for example, that have alcohol problems that get better do not go to Alcohol Anonymous. In other words, what they do is a set of circumstances come up where they are repetitively reminded that that they're in a trap and that this is a bad deal, and they make repeated efforts to get out of the trap, and eventually they succeed because they're highly motivated. And of course, the success is essentially, I'm not going to say always, but it is very, very close to a rule. We cannot say that it is an absolute rule, but it is close. That abstinence is basically the only option. So in the same way, anybody talking about a major problem with chocolate or anything else, I don't know, maybe it's fried chicken. In other words, you could have some specific taste with a specific individual that would be just essentially having a drug addictive like process. If that's true, we have to respect it as if it is essentially a drug. And if it's problematic enough, so it's not just you wanting a couple of chocolate chip cookies a night. No, it's like, you're eating a pound of chocolate, or damn near close to it daily. It's out of control. And if it's at that level where this is a very serious thing, then we have to look at it as, okay, there is no in between. If we're going to be successful, we're going to have to be abstinent. And that abstinence means cleaning out the environment, getting yourself in a situation where nobody's bringing chocolate into the house. Right. And we have to white knuckle it. Okay. Right. Your mind goes through a decay function when you stay away from a stimulus, and you will begin to forget. So after 15 days of abstinence, day 16 will only be half as hard as day 1. Right. In other words, it'll be there, and it's still reminding you and still tickling you, and half is a lot. And it can reel you right back in if we wander into the wrong place at the wrong time, and we get weak and we get hungry and we get self-indulgent. So then we're back on the trap again. Right. But you can get out of this trap. And my lecture on that I did with Gustavo, it's online somewhere, probably on the Gustavo site. It's called The Conditioned Cram. If you substitute cramming and you substitute in your own mind chocolate with that lecture, you will see the seeds of the solution, which is in understanding the decay functions and the learning curves about how they work. It can be very inspiring to to understand that your job is, the first 3 or 4 days of getting out of an addictive trap is by far the hardest, because we go through what's known as the extinction burst.
Right.
And so that lecture is an underrated lecture, and it's just like one too many things. All the stuff we talk about is supposed to be so simple. It's not simple at all. It's complicated. It's a complicated, upside down, inside out motivational disaster is what the pleasure trap is. And so we are surprised, actually, when anybody takes this information and runs with it and does well. It's like, I expect you to be going through a minefield for the rest of your life. And our job is to be reasonably successful so that our health is pretty well protected and we have a pretty good life. That's a good outcome. The condition cram and the information that's inside of the condition cram webinar is actually completely on point with all pleasure trap processes, and like it doesn't have to be cram. It's chocolate, like learning curve, reinforcement, spontaneous recoveries, what do we call it? Extinction burst defenses. It's like, oh man, your nervous system doesn't want you to forget about a supernormal, highly rewarding, unbelievably valuable stimulus for an organism that was designed for an environment of scarcity. So you can bet that you're in a hell of a challenge, and all I can tell you is that challenge gets significantly easier, though not trivial, with abstinence. Okay?
Right.
That is the solution.
Well, yes, and I was looking at some of the comments here, but total abstinence, I think it's the only way in this kind of situation.
That kind of a case.
I think AJ was here earlier, or is here, and she was saying, why be normal? Because you said that that's the answer that we can expect from her. So.
Oh my goodness, AJ is one of a kind. This is there are these. We've got icons out there that show us what's possible, and that's unbelievably valuable for people to see what's possible. It's important to realize that we can't always replicate what they do. Sometimes we can approximate it, and that's where we need to aim our ship.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. We very much appreciate this wonderful lecture, and I will include the link to that webinar that we did. It's not on the website, but it's in my YouTube channel. But I'm gonna, when this replay goes out, I'll include it there so people can watch it.
Right. Terrific.
It's very good. Very good. Well, thank you again, Dr. Lisle. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Absolutely.
And
thanks for having me, Gustavo.
No, thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next week for our next session of the book club. Okay.
Fantastic, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week.